Hello, friends. Welcome back to 1D10T Does Stuff, and I'm the idiot in charge, Trevor Stewart 1308. And we will be reading from Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia by Sabrina Strings today. But first, let me get the ad read out of the way. Today's pre-rolls brought to you by The Hidden Leaf, downtown Charlottesville, Virginia, 105 West Main Street on the downtown mall, above the brick, Suite 200, a great place to go with some great buds to get some great buds. A bud, and the only thing better than their bud is their customer service. Also, they have the lowest prices in town, according to my own personally highly biased research, by which I mean I was incredibly high when I did my personally biased research. You can find them on Instagram at The Hidden Leaf, where you can also find our other sponsors, Kush Gang Snacks, purveyors of fine edibles and drinkables at KG Snacks 434 on Instagram, and Firehouse Organics, spelled with a Z. That's Firehouse Organics, spelled with a Z. Findable at Firehouse Organics, spelled with a Z, on Instagram. These guys. A note of disclaimer: all of the opinions you will hear this evening belong to the expressor of the opinion, myself, the channel, and or the parent company, but not necessarily any of our advertisers, including Hidden Leaf, Kush Gang Snacks, and Firehouse Organics. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm sorry I'm a little lackluster this morning. Keeping up my energy has been... I was pretty tired yesterday, and while I got a lot of sleep last night, I'm still a bit tired today. But we will go ahead and... dig right in. Now, a couple of notes up front. First off, Tuesdays are generally, we will be dealing with some difficult topics, including racism and sexism, and various other difficult topics, but primarily racism and sexism. So, if that is going to be difficult, feel free to look away. However, I encourage white men specifically to not look away, because they're the ones. I know I'm pretty white appearing and male appearing, are the ones who will benefit from this education. I mean, everybody will benefit if white males get this education. So, yeah. We also, this is if you're watching this on Twitch, a charity stream for Mental Health Liberation, an organization that helps women get mental health care. I don't know a lot about it. I took a brief look over its page. I really should have put the ASOC prod on digging into them, but she has a day job now, so... well, alright. So, yeah, difficult topics ahead. Hey, Jessme Crystal. Happy Thursday. Much love. I hope you're doing well today. Great to see you here. I did take a sip of 5-hour energy before we started, so hopefully that'll kick in shortly and I'll have energy again. Oh, good, good. I'm glad to hear you're doing well. I am okay. I'm a bit tired. Apparently Sunday's DJ stream took more out of me than I thought it was going to. And while I spent yesterday recovering, I I'm still a bit tired. Yeah. I I'm considering starting earlier on Sundays and ending earlier on Sundays. I'm considering doing Sunday DJs. Pardon me. I'm considering doing Sunday DJ streams at about the same time frame as tonight's DJ stream, which is from around 5 to around 10. I think that's what I'm gonna start shooting for. Because going till midnight is just taking it all out of me. I may shoot for 11, but thank you, Just Me Crystal. Thank you. I will be okay. I just need to be mindful of what my body needs. It's a part of generally getting older is being more and more aware of what your body is capable of and isn't capable of. And my body is at this point no longer capable of rocking it out until midnight. Or at least not doing that and then being productive the next day. Well, all right. Let us dig into the topic at hand. If you have something fluffy to drink, and something warm to smoke, I recommend you do that. Oh, by way of update, I was cleared to leave arm uncovered and allowed to wet, but no scrubbing. Well, yay for being able to at least rinse the arm off. I'm glad to hear that you're healing. That is wonderful, Just Me Crystal. We are all pulling for your full recovery. I can shower now. Yay. You know, I do love taking baths. I mean, I miss it so much. But a bath never leaves me feeling very clean. It just leaves me feeling like I stewed in my own for a while. So after a bath, I like to take a shower. Showers are for getting clean. Baths are for relaxing. At least that's my opinion. And you can tell the 5-hour energy shot kicked in because I'm fidgeting. All right. So, on with the topic at hand, which is the origins of racism and sexism in the medical institutions of the United States. So, yeah. if you've got something fluffy to drink, something warm to smoke, and a dank spot to sit, now's the time to get comfy. Because we're going to start dealing with stuff. We are starting a new chapter today. We will be starting Chapter 5, American Beauty, Reign of the Slender Aesthetic. There we go. Now, we are gonna go back and read the last paragraph of the last chapter to get us a running start, as we always do. And we've been discussing the aesthetic, the beauty aesthetic, or as they've been calling it, the ascetic aesthetic of the 16 and 1700s, mainly the mid to late 1700s in England. In the last chapter or so. And this chapter is going to be about how the slender aesthetic made it to the United States and what we did with it, which is... Man, if you want something overdone to dangerous levels, let the U.S. handle it. Just saying. It's like we have no chill setting. There's a thought in there about how Americans, United States citizens, Americans, we have no chill setting, and there's a reason for it. I don't know exactly what it is, but there's something in our national past. And I'm sure I could, if I thought hard and did some research, I'm sure I could figure it out. But that, whatever that is, that we have, it's not surprising, if you think about it, that would eventually lead to such a polarized populace, such a not chill populace. I mean, not having any sense of chill leads to extremism. There's something in there somewhere. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to get to that thought. But there is something in that thought there. It would be a good video essay for somebody who was good at video essays. Oh, gosh. It's too bad the ASOC prod has so much going on. She'd be good at writing video essays. I need to find somebody who's good at writing video essays, but doesn't really want to be on video essays. Oh, okay. All right, I got it now. I think I've got a plan. Anyway, that non sequitur aside, let's get back to the more serious stuff. We're gonna actually back up 1.5 paragraphs, just for some context. For some scholars, a sylph-like type of feminine beauty has become synonymous with the name Gainsborough. Gainsborough may have tried to accurately reflect the slender forms of the wealthy women he painted. As Joseph Spence suggested and Lady Mary attested, the women appeared to have had a preference for being svelte. Or he may have taken a bit of artistic license and imbued them with the lines of his preferred aesthetic. Either way, Gainsborough's body of work represents, among other things, a sustained meditation on the slender as beautiful. Gainsborough's influence on the history of art is unquestioned, and whether or not he can lay claim to having commemorated the famed British author Lady Mary in his artistic portfolio, she too became an inspiration in the development of svelteness as a feminine beauty ideal. This trend, already visible in 18th century England, would reach new heights of popularity in the 19th century. By then, there would be much less ambivalence than had been seen among its earlier adherents. 19th century women would be proudly slender and profess a Protestant Anglo-Saxon heritage. And these women were to be found in the United States. Anglo-Saxon. Is that specifically British trousers? Is that a British person wearing trousers? An Anglo slacks on. Wearing nice trousers. I need to write at least the punchline down so I don't forget it. Anglo slacks on. I should feel bad about that, but I kind of don't. All right, but now really back to the serious stuff. And what I see is a typo, apparently. All right, let's try this again. Chapter 5. American Beauty, the Reign of the Slender Aesthetic. My prediction is that this is where we are really gonna see. We're gonna see the racism no longer being covert. This is where I think. I have read this before, but like, I do not remember that well. As we have discussed in the past, my memory is, what were we talking about? All right. Sarah Josepha Buell. Sarah Josepha Buell never planned to become a writer. Go on. You can get up. I've taken over their step to get up and out of the window to use it for the board to read on. So they don't really like jumping up here when there's stuff up here. And so they don't really want to jump up and leave when I've got the book and the highlighters and the stuff going on. Oh, there we go. Oh, sweet boy. That was El Vato. Sarah Josepha Buell never planned to become a writer. Born in 1788 in Newport, New Hampshire, and being a girl, she was barred from attending school. Instead, young Sarah received private tutoring from her older brother and her mother. That she had been denied a formal education ignited in Buell a passion for educating girls. She likely did not anticipate, however, that an enduring part of her legacy would be teaching women and girls not just to read and write, but how best to comport themselves as modern Anglo-Saxon Protestant women. Integral to her teachings was that Christian temperance in food and drink was best in the eyes of God, and it bred the slender physiques that offered evidence of racial superiority. There it is. There's the racism right there. And I think we can go forward with that. It's almost a given that the Americans are going to just be awful. All right, and I do want to take a quick moment and note what is a typo here. They put in a period and capitalized the and. And I see why they wanted to do that. I turned the period into a comma and decapitalized the and. But in retrospect, I think that would have been a proper place for a semicolon. More of a pause than a comma, but not a whole new sentence. Semicolon. And you can start those semi-sentences with an and. But I'm not a pro. I don't know. Buell is a compelling starting point for a discussion of how, in the United States, the ascetic aesthetic, born in 18th century Britain, met with religious revivals, the expansion of racial theorizing, and the immigration of persons feared to be part Negroid to make thinness a key goal for Anglo-Saxon Protestant women during the 19th century. As history shows, some in America, as in Britain, continued to push back against the fashion of excessive slimness. Nevertheless, many American women and men during the era began to regard svelte forms as a superior aesthetic ideal for white Christian women. I think. There's a lot in this that is the sort of thesis of what I'm trying to take away from this chapter. And generally, this book and that is that this idea that that whiteness means health is basically the point of that, you know. And let me be clear, I personally don't believe that. Health is different for every individual. What my body needs, what my body considers healthy, is very different from what someone else's body considers healthy or needs. But more than that, race is a social construct, not a biological inevitability. No. Not a biological definition, even. And so it's not classification. That's the word I'm looking for. Also, so the idea that what is healthy is white is really a very socially constructed idea based on I don't want to say based on with the aim of othering whole groups of people. An attempt to define white as good and not white as bad. That's what all of this, that's what all of the, yeah, yeah. Convinced of the importance of a formal education for women at a time when such a thing was extremely rare, Sarah Buell became a school teacher during the first decade of the 19th century. A few years later, in 1813, she left this post to marry a lawyer named David Hale. She would later reminisce fondly of their time as a couple, reading together, writing poems, and discussing ideas. The aim of Mr. Hale, she wrote, was to enlighten my reason, strengthen my judgment, and give me confidence in my own powers of mind. Their wedded bliss ended in tragedy a mere 9 years after it began, when David died of a stroke, leaving Sarah to raise their 5 children alone. Because David Hale had not been a wealthy man, Sarah needed to figure out how best to feed and educate her young brood. She leaned on the writing skills she had been honing under her husband's tutelage, gathering together a collection of poems she had written prior to her husband's death. She managed to have them published with the aid of her late husband's the Freemasons. In the 1830s, Sarah Hale was to make an indelible mark on English literature. The first year of the decade, she published her second book of poetry, Poems for Our Children. The book contained a nursery rhyme she had crafted titled Mary Had a Little Lamb, which would go on to become one of the most recognizable poems in the country. Normally that wouldn't be ominous sounding. Normally we'd be like, oh, that's cute, but in this context, that just sounds ominous. Poetry was only one vehicle through which Hale hoped to both earn a living and educate girls and young women. In 1828, she accepted a position as editor of Ladies' Magazine, a publication founded by the Boston-based clergyman John Loris Blake. Its purpose, according to Hale, was to prove the advantages of a general diffusion of literature among all classes of both sexes. Accordingly, the magazine was largely literary, serving up poems, short stories, and a few minor biographies. Hale also included, against her will, a few pieces on women's fashion. She'd apparently done so only to satisfy popular demand, writing, "There is no part of our duties as editors of a ladies' journal which we feel so reluctant to perform as to quote or exhibit the fashions of dress." After a few years of including fashion plates in its pages, Ladies' Magazine clamped down on this form of entertainment, keeping its content oriented to the somber business of educating young ladies. Shortly thereafter, the bottom fell out of the magazine's revenues. Somehow I'm not surprised. There is no direct evidence that the financial problems that would ultimately signal the demise of ladies' magazines were caused by a lack of interest, if not disdain, of women's fashion. Still, one can't help but notice that when Ladies' Magazine was bought out in 1836 by Louis Gotti, it successfully merged with its former competitors, Gotti's Ladies book, which was renowned for its dedication to showcasing the latest in women's haute fashions, due in no small part to its images of lovely rich women decked out in the best fineries. Godey's Ladies book quickly became the most popular women's magazine in the country, a title it would retain for the rest of the 19th century. The popularity of Gotti's Ladies book was due to more than its display of sumptuous clothing and decadent jewels. Its appeal had a lot to do with its effort to create what historian... Cheese and crackers, Trevor. Take a breath, try again. The popularity of Godey's Ladies book was due to more than its display of sumptuous clothing and decadent jewels. Its appeal had a lot to do with its effort to create what the historian Benedict Anderson might describe as an imagined community of white middle-class Protestant women. In the midst of the massive social upheaval of the mid-19th century, the redefinition of just who was an American, Gotti's Ladies book was a guidepost for such women. Conjuring the spirit of the Spectator across the Atlantic, the publication treated Christian ladies to burgeoning middle-class, light-hearted entertainments. It suffused its merriment with lessons in the necessary moral principles for proper conduct. The difference, of course, was that while the Spectator focused on its moralizing rhetoric, on the cultivation of men, Gotti's Ladies book focused on teaching girls and young women the rules of white Christian white. Try that again. Gotti's Ladies book focused on teaching girls and young women the rules of polite white Christian society. Hale, as the publication's editor, wanted nothing to do with fashion plates for women of leisure. But questions involving said women's moral advancement were of great interest to her. She found it no less than her duty to instruct her female readers as to how to behave properly before the eyes of God. Pardon me. A central theme as it pertained to questions of correct conduct was temperance in eating and drinking. Articles on this topic often reminded women that they were the moral guardians of the home. Often reminded women they were the moral guardians of the home and the custodians of cuisine. Thus, it was their responsibility to check the indecencies or indulgences to which men were prone. In an article, we're going to go ahead and highlight that too, just because that is that sort of take on women being responsible for men's emotional labor, I think, is part of all of this. In an article from 1839 written by a Miss Sigourney, but featured in a section called The Editor's Table, the author writes, "Excesses are too often indulged in, but can any man devise a more effectual check upon them than the presence of a woman?" While claims of women's moral conservatorship were common, still more common were reminders to women and young girls that they should check their own indulgences and excesses at the table. Although these arguments were prevalent under Hale's editorship, they had begun even before she took over. In an unassigned Godey's article from 1831, 5 years before Hale arrived, an anonymous author reminded readers of what she described as the baneful effects of a protracted and abundant repast. She suggested that overeating combined with the practice of tight lacing one's corset, a bogus corrective to filling one's belly in the first place, were harmful to health. The solution she offered was first temperance, a well-timed use of the table and so moderate a pursuit, followed by a gentle open-air exercise. It was, in fact, seen as more important for women to regulate themselves than to regulate their husbands. The reason for that being for women, overeating was not just immoral and unhealthy, it could also destroy their beauty. Mixing of beauty standards and health standards. Another article from the same year makes a similar plea, noting that temperance let's try that again too. Another article from the same year makes a similar plea, noting that temperance includes moderation at table, before going on to excoriate some well-bred women for their crude excesses. Their breakfast not only set forth tea and coffee, but chocolate and hot bread and butter. The author was not simply concerned about issues of immorality. She says that bread and butter, when taken constantly, are hostile to health and female delicacy, and further reminds the reader that a young beauty, as elegant as goddess of love herself, would soon lose these charms by a course of inordinate eating and drinking. This later quote is a clear reference to Venus, the famed standard bearer of Western beauty. The author was troubled by the prospect that well-born American women were eating in a way that was in The author was troubled by the prospect that well-born American women were eating in a way that was indecent, unhealthy, and significantly likely to breed the stout physiques that, counter to Renaissance notions, would be considered a determinant to the beauty of young damsels. A detriment. Something interesting in that. I'm not sure exactly how to qualify what I mean by that, but that the editors of Godey's Lady's book would, in the 1830s, advocate temperance at the table can be better understood through an examination of the social context in which they offer their lessons. The 1830s fit squarely within the so-called Age of Reform, a period that extended roughly from 1815 to 1863, and was punctuated by several overlapping Protestant movements. In other words, once we have the context, the reasoning will become more clear. And the Age of Reform is what was going on at the time. The first of these was the Second Great Awakening, a Protestant religious revival that swept through the American South and Northeast between 1790 and 1850, and represented a rebellion against the secularism of the era. The Great Awakening inspired countless Americans to renew their religious commitments, but more important, its impassioned, often feverish appeals for its members to get to know the Lord and His Word incited thousands to align themselves with sects of Protestantism, such as Methodism and Baptism, whose previous membership had been minimal. At the same time, and arguably as an offshoot of the Second Great Awakening, the temperance movement was taking root. Now, temperance. Oh, buddy, I'm sorry. I hope you feel better soon, too. The temperance movement was difficult to encapsulate because I feel like it was a great thing that women were becoming agents of their own destinies at that point. That they were taking their own, they saw a problem with men getting drunk and beating women and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and said, no, we will not have this. And I also think that the temperance movement was aimed at the wrong thing. While I am not a drinker anymore, I'd have attended Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't believe alcohol in and of itself is evil. I don't think any drug in and of itself is evil. I think that it's the people who use it have stuff inside of them that they need to deal with. You know, and sometimes the stuff inside of them that they need to deal with is just that they need to party, and that's fine. But sometimes they are violent people inside. It ain't the drug or the alcohol that made them violent. It's that that's in them already. And I think taking up arms and going after what you can go after is important and good. I think that they probably could not take up arms and go after men at the time, so they had to go after alcohol. It's a complicated thing. I wish to acknowledge the good parts of it for the parts of it that were good. All right. Got that out. Got that done. At the same time, and arguably as an offshoot of the Second Great Awakening, the temperance movement was taking root. Visible as early as 1808 in New York and 1813 in Massachusetts, and budding in many of the same churches that the Great Awakening built. This movement initially aimed merely to limit the sale and consumption of liquor, but later advocated its prohibition. The movement's boosters asserted that the nation's moral fiber was weakening under growing unemployment, spousal abuse, indolence, and general apathy, all of which could be traced to the rampant alcoholism. By the 1830s, the temperance movement had birthed thousands of teetotaling organizations. Finally, the 1830s also saw the growth of another type of consumption constricting movement, the popular health movement, of which the Presbyterian minister and temperance advocate Sylvester Graham was a cracker. I mean, was the most notable figure. This guy. And here we are. Here is where we get to the beginnings of the health being related to beauty sort of ideas that, because this guy Graham, this Graham cracker, this cracker right here, this cracker, can you tell I have a special disdain for this guy? Gotta say, the only thing I think his crackers are actually good for, I mean, other than s'mores, is pie crust. So that's about all I think this man did for the world, was he made the bread for s'mores sandwiches and pie crust stuff. But, you know, you can crush up Oreos and use those instead of graham crackers. I got opinions about this dude. Graham was a cracker. Graham would claim that a diet rich in animal foods was the cause of American dyspepsia, an allegedly widespread illness among the well-to-do. He also argued that stimulants such as tea, coffee, and spice, especially combined with a meat-based diet, provoked a ravenous, unchristian sexual appetite in men. But while many of Graham's lectures targeted men, women routinely made up the bulk of the audience at his sermons. F this dude. F a lot of this dude. That's all I'm saying. F him. With the many and overlapping Protestant reform movements of the early 19th century, women came out in force. If the most prominent figures in these movements... we're going to go ahead and underline that. And we'll go ahead and F him. Coffee's important. If the most prominent figures in these movements were men, women were the true foot soldiers for the cause. Middle-class women outnumbered men among converts in the Second Great Awakening, and they were also the main trumpeters of temperance and dedicated diet reform. So it was that in the 1830s, when Louis Gotti launched his ladies' magazine, it was only natural that he should choose to explore and exploit a topic that recently christened middle-class women held dear to their hearts. The genius of Gotti's ladies' book lay not simply in its ability to pick up on the era's spirit of reform. Gotti's also enticed the newly hatched generation of women of means with the fripperies and frills of luxury which would have been out of reach for the average American woman of a generation prior. Show him the bling and sell him the grift. The early 19th century had ushered in a new age of manufacturing in the United States. For the first time, items like clothing and shoes were being produced in factories. Those who labored in the factories constituted the bulk of America's emerging working class. At the same time, those who oversaw labor, for instance, those working in offices and as managers, came to form a separate class of people. These middle-class workers were separated from the working class and the comparatively narrower strata from the upper class in several ways that went beyond the jobs they held. Members of the middle class were distinguished by where they lived and the churches and schools they attended, and particularly for women, middle class standing was identifiable via the finery they could afford to wear. It was the astute blending of moral lessons in proper Christian conduct with instructions on how to appear in public as a fashionable lady of the new middle class that made Gotti's a sensation. Indeed, the magazine's success appeared to hinge on the combined talents of both Gotti and Hale. Since Hale's own fashion-free experiment had been a flop and Gotti's ladies' book had floundered between 1830 and 1836, the years before Hale's editorship. Sarah Hale may not have been a major figure in any of the reform movements of the 19th century, but as an evangelical Christian, a temperance advocate, and a diet reformer, she was involved in all three of them. Rather than being a movement leader or a foot soldier for these causes, Hale played her part by using Gotti's as a platform for those who were actively engaged in these movements. Under her leadership, the discussion of temperance expanded. In the magazine's editor's table feature, Hale promoted new and varied texts and treatises on temperance. Gotti's could now boast entertaining fiction revealing the value of temperance, known as temperance tales. It also featured recipes for the modern Christian woman, and fittingly, given Hale's interest in educating the youth, the gentle reader could find information on proper feeding and table manners for children. There was even a song titled A Temperance Dinner to which ladies were invited. The song, composed by Oliver Wendell Holmes, M.D., echoed the doctor's solemn joy at the way new women chastely managed their household. Chastely managed her household and her palate. The days are no more, he noted, when she watched for her lord till the reveal was o'er, the joys of his banquet to chasten and share, the rose of her cheek dissolved in his wine. The good women of today, he rejoiced, bathed not in the midst of Bacchanal's dream, but the lilies of innocence float on their stream. What? And yet, what appeared in Godley's under Hale's guidance was not just an increase in the number of articles and essays on the proper amount to eat and drink to satisfy God, health, and the pursuit of beauty. These three topics had been addressed before Hale took over as editor. Under Hale came a fourth and previously little considered aspect of being right-minded middle-class Protestant women: the need to prove one's racial superiority as an Anglo-Saxon. I made a note here that I felt like we had not touched on the chattel slavery, dehumanization of black bodies nearly as much as I felt like it was important to have done. But I feel like that is upcoming. And I feel like that note is a bit of foreshadowing. But for today, we have reached the end of that section. And I believe this is where we are going to call it in. There we go. Yes, I believe this is where we are going to call it in for the day. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Just Be Crystal. Thank you, Darth Dragonis. Thank you, all you lurkers. Much love. Stick around for the raid. Now is the time on the show when I say, as they say around here, 2 up, 2 down, VA double deuces. I'm out, y'all.